This is the Bama Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are joined by Josh Bossé as we consider Hosea 5 and the wisdom it holds, exhorting us to remember the dangers of trying to use God for our own agendas.
Well, we would never do that. We would never use God for our own agenda.
I mean...
Not I, said Marty.
Surely not I, Lord.
Wow. That was a doozy of an intro. I think we need a few verses just to dive right in here. So
only one way. Got to go through this.
With no further ado, go ahead, Brent.
Excellent work, Marty. Hear this, you priests. Pay attention, you Israelites. Listen, royal house. This judgment is against you. You have been a snare at Mizpah, a net spread out on Tabor. The rebels are knee-deep in slaughter. I will discipline all of them. I know all about Ephraim. Israel is not hidden from me. Ephraim, you have now turned to prostitution. Israel is corrupt.
All right, so I want to jump in here. And the first thing, Josh, what I think I want to do is I just want to go through a Peshat level, just really quick cursory overview.
Yeah.
And then I think we should dive into some remezim that I think we were discussing before we hit the record button.
Yep.
But we got these opening verses, Hosea chapter 5. And one of the just initial Peshat notes that I had as I prepared for this was last episode, chapter 4, was this indictment really pointed directly at leadership. And we didn't spend a lot of time there because we were trying to hear the message of Hosea 4. We were trying to hear it for us. We weren't trying to make it about somebody else, which is what we often like to do. This is about them. This is about those darn leaders. This is about everybody else. And we really wanted to see if there was anything in Hosea 4 for us to learn. Chapter 5 starts there and then seems to allude to this, like there's a widening of the circle, not only of blame, but also of impact. So this isn't just about the priests. The very next line, pay attention, you Israelites. Listen, royal house. There's a relationship between what the leadership does and what ends up bleeding out into all the people under their leadership. So there is a starting point, at least as the message in Hosea is delivered. Like it starts at the top. This starts from a particular kind of leadership corruption. But unfortunately, it doesn't end there. It doesn't stay contained, which is why the judgment is so strong, cutting, blatant against leadership often in the scripture, because the ramifications, the consequences of corruption on that level is that it gets into all the other stuff. And I don't know if there's anything there, Josh, that you see, but I noticed this widening of the circle there.
Yeah, and I think that kind of follows along even, with what you explained about your intent with the last episode to try and, not just jump into the easy like, oh, it's those dang clowns in Congress, and therefore I don't have to think about this and my hands are clean.
Right.
But, seeing the way that in chapter 4, like, we're following the cookie trail of like, oh, where did this problem start? Like being a little detective. And then we trace it all the way back up to leadership. And now like we start there, but we're seeing the effects of that. So it still ends up applying to us. It's a really big gut punch for the leadership because, especially the further we get into this, but that idea of, I love where we stopped too, where it's just like that Israel, like the whole people has been corrupted. Like that's kind of it in short. And one other thing I noticed too is, because I was curious about that word rebels in verse 2.
Sure.
Are these rebels, like, who are they rebelling against? And I wanted to look at it too, because earlier when I was reading some of I think it was in chapter 2 where it talks about the children. It's telling the children, like, rebel against your mother. So I'm like, oh, is this another group that are rebelling against them? But it seems like this is an indictment of leadership, not people that are rebelling. But, maybe God's saying, the rebels have, caused these other problems. But what I love about it is in the Hebrew, and I wish Elle was here because I'm sure there's more to this than what I can see. But there seems to be some wordplay because that the verse starts with the word for slaughter, that as we see, like, the rebels have gone deep into slaughter. I forget what translation you're looking at, Brent, so apologies to the listener if it sounds like I'm looking at something different.
No, there's I'm using NIV, but apparently there's some debate on this particular sentence between Masoretic text and other manuscripts, with some potential shifting of letters that change things a little bit.
Huh.
Well, it's interesting you say that because the letters in those two words are very similar, with the root being the shin and the tet. So we have the word shachat and the word shoot are the two.
Sure.
So there is like, regardless of what the like inner workings and all the
Sure.
craziness that I'm sure was going on at the time, this idea that it's just rampant violence and suffering, and that is like it, because of what the leadership has done, and because they have the power and the authority at their disposal and have so misused it, it has made it so that like just everything downstream of them, everything downstream of the leadership, all the people, it's just violence every way you turn. Like it.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have, it doesn't seem like there's another option. It almost makes it inevitable. Not to alleviate anyone of their personal moral responsibility, but just it sounds very Noah alike, like where it says like the whole earth is filled with violence. Like,
yeah, sure.
Just violence. Like it has that kind of gross, just like all encompassing. Ugh.
Yeah, it's very befitting of that opening episode with Elle and her pointing out the condemnation of violence, and we're seeing that language that I typically read over. And I love the play on words potentially here in the Hebrew, very, very poetic, very typical of the prophets, very beautiful, kind of like that guttural language of repetitious sounds and words as it like plays. It makes these words, these word plays. Your first reflection, Josh, about just it starts with leaders, then goes elsewhere. And I was even thinking, I mean, there's still plenty of this. Trust me, I'm not trying to let any leaders off the hook. There's plenty of corruption in the spiritual and the Christian world today to go around as far as idolatry and violence and all kinds of things. So not letting anybody off the hook. But I even think about being in a position, being friends with other pastors and leaders who then they see this and they want to start correcting it. But the problem is it's gotten into everything.
Yep.
And so that if you say the wrong thing, if you preach the wrong sermon, if you make that point too broadly or too bluntly, like your careers are on the line, you really can't, you can't dig into that stuff, and just how tricky that whole dance becomes. Because it was up here, then it got into everything else, and then it becomes really hard to try to lead anybody back to where we ought to be. I didn't even think about that as I prepared for this, but I thought that was a really, really good point.
I think, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that's really fitting. And I think that's good to keep in mind, especially as this chapter, return or points at some of the things we've already talked about how, the next generation, your children, this is just going to run rampant all through their lives. You cannot change that. There is no more off ramp. You've been pouring gasoline all over your house, and then finally a spark hit, and it's like there is not a lot you can do at this point. It's like and I think sometimes when we see God saying this is what's going to happen, we think God is pressing the button to say, okay, now this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have otherwise. And I don't think that's the case.
Right.
It seems to be in a certain sense, God pointing out what's happening in front of you is not just, oh, people are crazy these days,
Right.
It's no, you caused this, and this is going to just, you're the one who set this in motion. You chose this.
Right.
And maybe you regret it now, but the choice was already made.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I think that's a good segue into let's look at maybe some of these references that I love to just read over, because it's Mizpah, Tabor, Ephraim, of course, obviously. But then you stop and you go, okay, wait a minute. Mizpah could be a lot of things. Tower, it seems to be a callback to the story of Jacob and Laban. there is this story where they both erect these towers, two different names, two different gods they're calling on, because there's this disagreement and they're trying to like reconcile this disagreement. But Jacob seems to make the prayer that he essentially prays in the midst of this whole story is that if God will protect him, he'll follow. Like in the midst of this whole section of Genesis, Jacob's working off this assumption that if God protects me, then I'll follow him, which is a weird transactional, like, God, if you'll do this for me, then I will. This is just where Jacob's at in his storyline, which is interesting because that's going to be, spoiler alert, what Hosea 5 is largely going to condemn the people of Israel. You're trying to use me, God says. You're trying to use me for your ends. Like, if I'll do what you want, you'll be my people. And that's not how it's going to work. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. But that's the Mizpah. Do you see anything else in that Jacob or Mizpah reference that you would pull out as well, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, for one thing, like I think it's a good image too, because it isn't just, referencing it. It's saying you've been a trap at Mizpah, like at the watchtower. So we could even insert this dynamic of protection and following, and like we've just had chapter after chapter of the people have followed you in the decisions that you made, but you haven't even protected them. You've led them into the mouth of hell.
Yes.
And it being like the place where you were supposed to have been watched over has become a trap. Like the person who was protecting you was the person betraying you.
Yep.
Which, I mean, man, I'm sure if we think about leadership and abuses of leadership that we may have experienced, like, boy, oh boy, especially in the church, we're supposed to be the good guys. And not only that, what's interesting is this, the wording of the specific covenant, when Lavan says it, is that he's like, we'll set this up so that we can trust in this boundary we're setting, even when we can't see each other. That's how little we trust each other. Like, if I don't see Lavan, I'm wondering what he's doing, what trap he's setting for me. And so it's like, I wonder if they like built the tower so that they could have like a guard station there to keep an eye out and be like, well, at least I've got my guy watching my troublesome neighbor. But like that, the place where it was supposed to be your line of defense has become the trap. And that is such a perfect encapsulation of like the leaders. Like, not only are they caught in a trap, you were the trap. You set it
right
in this place that's symbolic of your duty as a leader.
Right. Totally. Absolutely.
And then you found something for Tabor. What was that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, boy, does that roll right into the Tabor references? So Mount Tabor, Jerome is 4th century church historian, church teacher, and yet Jerome seems to give us like, I don't know what Jerome's story was. I got to do some more study on Jerome, because Jerome seems to always be toying with the Jewish commentary, the Jewish midrash, Jewish perspective, like for whatever reason, because it's late. I mean, 4th century is later than you would expect somebody, but Jerome more than anybody. We've talked about Jerome telling us about was it 513? No, 153 fish, excuse me. And the 153 references. And it's Jerome that references the gematria of that. So it's Jerome that seems to be tapped into this whole Jewish perspective. But Jerome references the Jewish understanding that Tabor was where you snared birds. Like it was the great hunting grounds. Like, I know that there are places where I could go if I wanted to go bird hunting around here in the Midwest, or if I was back in the Pacific Northwest. There are places I would go to do my... Tabor was one of those places where you would, in their world, you wouldn't shoot them with a shotgun, you'd snare them. I find it real interesting. The comment was, you have been a snare at Mizpah, a net spread out on Tabor. So a reference to that, I find it interesting. Tabor, like you were just talking about the tower serving as this boundary. Well, Tabor was Judges 4 with Deborah and Barak.
Yes.
And another boundary between enemy and protection and safety. So that continues to be all the way through. There's a really interesting reference that I found on Wikipedia, of all places. Darn that Wikipedia. Referencing apparently Albert Barnes is the quotation, the citation there. But it said... By encouraging idolatries, they became hunters, not pastors of souls. And you noted the very next verses that follow, like there's a pastoral, so they've become hunters rather than the pastoral caretakers that they're supposed to be protecting other people. So boy, is that consistent. This feels very intentional, not just coincidental on the part of the author here.
This feels so the opposite of the Deborah story, because
yes,
I was just looking at the details of that story, and Mount Tabor isn't actually where the fight happens. God, through Deborah, tells Barak, her husband, who's leading the people, go up onto Mount Tabor. And then they sweep down from Mount Tabor onto Sisera, and then he's, chased. And, he ends up falling to Yael, this woman in her house. And I'm sure there's probably a lot more to that story. So I'm sure Elle is probably grinding her teeth because I'm missing all the cool parts. But mea culpa. But the way in which in that story, it's like the protection of God is like coming from this very, from the women. And there is like a very explicit theme in that story of God working through women and specifically subverting the like conventional power structure.
Okay, sure.
And then here we kind of have that subversion of like your savior who's supposed to like you're going up onto this mountain to defend your people and all that. But it's now become a place of like hunting birds, like, these relatively like small game, very powerless. Like I don't know, there seems to be a theme there that's like, you got up on top of your mountain and instead of being interested in taking care of the Sisera, you were just like, hey, we can just hunt up here and chill out. And I don't know, there's something there. Probably more than I can see.
And it feels fitting for potentially the Hosea conversation with this prophetic metaphor with Gomer. And like, I wonder by the time we're done today, we might even see more stories that seem to call us back to stories about women and not being protected and violence and all kinds of things. I think by the time we're done, we've got even more on the docket, but I think that's fitting in that way as well. This whole Deborah story. And of all the things the author could call back to, why does the author choose these stories? Seems to be pretty intentional on Hosea's part. And I always get questions about Ephraim before we move on. Like, Ephraim seems to be a reference to, and we could do this for 10 minutes too, just the political power it's the seat of. It would be like referencing Washington, D.C. in the context of America, or Tehran in the context of Iran, or Jerusalem in Israel, or Moscow in Russia. Like, Ephraim seems to be that seat of political power in this northern kingdom that's receiving Hosea's correction, rebuke, call to repentance. That seems to be that. But I think the drash to this, we kind of did a pashat. Then we dug into these remezes. They seem to absolutely be connected here, calling us towards a theme. I feel like the drash is found in the next few verses. So, Brent, if you're ready, give us the next handful of verses here.
I'm ready. I've just been reading about Jerome while you guys were talking. So hopefully I didn't miss anything important. Okay. Verse 4. Their deeds do not permit them to return to their God. A spirit of prostitution is in their heart. They do not acknowledge the Lord. Israel's arrogance testifies against them. The Israelites, even Ephraim, stumble in their sin. Judah also stumbles with them. When they go with their flocks and herds to seek the Lord, they will not find him. He has withdrawn himself from them. They are unfaithful to the Lord. They give birth to illegitimate children. When they celebrate their new moon feasts, he will devour their fields.
All right, that phrase again. I'll do just kind of look at this on a pashat level, considering all those remezes we just looked at. Like, the phrase "he has withdrawn himself from them" stands out to me. The end of verse 6 there. God has withdrawn himself, and yet it's not that he's absent. Like, God isn't actually absent, but he has withdrawn himself. He has not made himself available to be exploited. Like, you want to exploit me. You want to use me for your violent ends. And I am not a pawn to be used for your own personal interests. Like, you will not take me and leverage me and use me in that way. You have prostituted yourselves, and God's not just this neutral thing. He's not like the pagan idols. You won't just be able to set me up and use me. I will. If you're not going to do the thing, Josh, if you're not going to protect, if you're not going to stand in the gap, if you're not going to be my kingdom of priests, I will. And it's never good when we fail that partnership and God has to show up and step in, because we're actually being, as we called it in the earlier sessions, the anti-story. That's never going to typically end very well. And this is God's pronouncement of caution, if not judgment, here in Hosea 5.
Yeah.
Brent, I think we're going to have some more. We're going to have some more remezes here in the next section. So we need the next few verses. I'm going to look at the Peshat again, and then we'll see if there's anything else being referenced. I bet people are going to get ahead of us. I bet people are going to beat us to the commentary. Here we go.
We can only hope. Sound the trumpet in Gibeah, the horn in Ramah. Raise the battle cry in Beth Aven. Lead on, Benjamin. Ephraim will be laid waste on the day of reckoning. Among the tribes of Israel, I proclaim what is certain. Judah's leaders are like those who move boundary stones. I will pour out my wrath on them like a flood of water. Ephraim is oppressed, trampled in judgment, intent on pursuing idols. I am like a moth to Ephraim, like rot to the people of Judah.
All right. So God says, I'm not going to be used as a pawn. In fact, I'm actually going to work against this agenda of you. So not only am I going to simply remove myself, not only is it going to seem to you like God has gone missing, but in fact, I'm going to turn around, actually point my face toward this situation and actively work against your violence, because that's the kind of God that I am. That seems to be how I would articulate some of the Peshat messaging here. But Josh, you were quick on the trigger earlier as we were looking at this. You noted. Tell me more about Gibeah. Tell me more about Ramah. Tell me about Beit Aven. Tell me about Benjamin. What a crazy reference this is that I didn't even see on a first pass.
I was, and honestly, I have not spent as much time on this as I want. I would not be surprised if there's more layers to this. So please, audience, go dig here. We have not come to the bottom. But just doing a real quick search on Gibeah and Ramah, would you believe that they turn up in the very same verse together? I guess they're close to each other. But, and for those of you that know where this chapter of Judges goes, it's not very pretty. This is found in Judges 19. Judges 19, where is it a Levite who's traveling?
Yeah, almost like a priest. And
almost like a priest.
And his covenantal, we often say concubine, but his covenantal wife.
Yes.
Very interesting.
He's going and he says to his servant, this is in verse 13 of chapter 19, come, let's approach one of these places. We'll spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah. And then, they're somewhere in that area and they come to this guy's house and they talk to him. And it turns out, even though they were in the hill country of Ephraim, the people who were living in this house were Benjamites. Wow, we have Ephraim and Benjamin and Gibeah and Ramah all in the same place. And this is, of course, the kind of the episode that we've talked so much in this series about awful things being done, particularly to women. So this is one of the this might be at the top of the heap in terms of those stories in the Bible. This is where we have the kind of repetition of the angels going to Sodom, where night falls and people come to the Benjamite's house. They say, give us the Levite there so that we can abuse him. And instead the host says, no, here, take my daughter instead, and take this guy's covenantal wife. And then this becomes a national symbol for cutting off Benjamin from the country, which is there is so much there that we could talk about. But this idea of again, the duties of the host, the duties of the people in the community to take care of the outsider, let alone their own people, they're just so the interconnectivity here is so rich, because we have a story about how do we treat strangers, and then we have this excoriation of political power that is partially about not giving a hoot about your own people and looking kindly at foreign power over your own people and selling them out to achieve your own agenda, not really thinking about what this will do to the people's future, or what they want or care about. The same way the host is like, oh, I'll give you my daughter and this guy's concubine or a covenantal wife. Like just that, like, oh, we can throw these people away so that we don't have to get hurt. And like, it's just so like, it's such a potent reference. Like I kind of don't even like every time I feel like I can see one parallel, like I look to my right and there's another parallel at a different angle. Like this is just such a good remez. I feel like there's so much here. I don't even know what to do with it.
It's phenomenal. It's like I when you made that connection, I was like, okay, Hosea, I see you. Like Hosea's so much. I wasn't expecting all this when I got ready for this series. I shouldn't be surprised by now. So, like sometimes I look at these, like especially these minor prophets, and I'm like, well, they were wonderful poets and they wrote some beautiful stuff, but I mean, they weren't doing the intertextuality of Paul or of Moses. And boy, are we wrong, because not only do you have another story about a man and his wife, just like the story of Hosea and Gomer, not only do you have another story of leadership and women characters, just by coincidence. No, it's not coincidence. Of course, these things are being tied together. But now we have a story, literally just every chapter of that story is just coded in violence. Like there's the violence of the Levite and his wife. There's the violence done against Benjamin, just what you said. So you said like no regard for the future in terms of, but then there was the story that came after where then you go to lay judgment against Benjamin. And that story has to end with them going, wait a minute, if we don't find a way, all of Benjamin drifts out of existence because we have to do something with the women and the wives. So you have all of these stories of violence, women, leadership, power, like this triangulation of these same 3 points keeps showing up in all of these remezes that we're seeing. And it's just wild. Like it wasn't in my Google Doc because I did not see that coming. But goodness gracious, what a crazy. And then just like the scathing, like you said, potent. Because essentially what Hosea is doing is like, lead on, Benjamin. You want to know who you are? You're Benjamin. Like you're the one that abused the people that you should have been welcoming. Like what a scathing, potent rebuke. What a line. Like lead on, Benjamin. Like, wow. Oh, gee, gut punch.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And especially that idea of Benjamin leading when the conclusion of that story was, oh, Benjamin's about to be wiped out. Like, there won't be a future for Benjamin to lead us into. I just now found something else that also ties in Benjamin. Because I was wondering about Bet Aven. I was like, why throw Bet Aven in there? You got this beautiful little triptych.
Yeah, I know where you're going. Yep.
You know where I'm going? 1 Samuel 14?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have right before Saul makes a really big boo-boo, we have a decisive victory against the Philistines that hinges on the ark of God being brought out to the battlefield. And then in the conclusion, it says, so the Lord saved Israel and the battle spread out beyond Bet Aven. And this is, right before, Saul bumbles into one of his biggest, this is the big mistake, right? Where he makes the vow about eating and then Jonathan violates it without knowing. And then he's like, I'm just going to do the sacrifice myself. And God's like, okay, you're done, dude. Get out. I might be misremembering that, but like this idea of a big decisive victory tied to Bet Aven with the Benjamite king and and God's presence being there, like specifically Saul is using God's presence for victory.
Yes. He's leveraging, he's trying to do the exact thing this prophecy is condemning. He's trying to use God's presence to leverage God as a pawn for his own agenda. It's another story with the same stuff in it. It's just fantastic. Absolutely. So we have this message of God saying, I'm not going to let you use me for your own agenda. I'm actually going to work against what you're doing, because what you're doing is actually, it's causing violence. It's doing violence on those that I'm trying to actually take care of, to embrace, to redeem. But for your own purposes and your own agenda and your own exploitation, you're trying to leverage me, and I'm not going to let that happen. So here's this judgment. Here's this warning. And you referenced just a moment ago, like all these stories, and maybe not all of them, but especially the story about Benjamin, like there's not going to be any future, like there's no future. And yet, Brent, finish off Hosea 5 for us.
When Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah his sores, then Ephraim turned to Assyria and sent to the great king for help. But he is not able to cure you, not able to heal your sores. For I will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a great lion to Judah. I will tear them to pieces and go away. I will carry them off with no one to rescue them. Then I will return to my lair until they have borne their guilt and seek my face. In their misery, they will earnestly seek me.
So pretty dark until the end, where all of a sudden there's this statement, until they have borne their guilt, until they admit their guilt, until they seek my, there's this assumption that actually there is a potential future. There's this call that, like, actually, if you'll see this, and this is what always makes me so uncomfortable sometimes. Sometimes I love it. Sometimes I call it a sprinkling of hope in session 2. Sometimes it makes me uncomfortable because now I'm like associating, like, yeah, corrupt leadership. I know what corrupt leadership looks like. To heck with them. God's judgment rained down upon them. And the Bible always goes, yeah, but if they want to recognize that, if they really want to do the work, and we'll talk about what the work is next episode. So hold on, everybody. Give us one more week. We'll do that in next week's episode. We'll talk about what that entails. But if they'll repent, they have a future. Just like Benjamin had a future. That was a pretty dark story. That was pretty screwed up. And because they were willing to figure out what to do with their future, God didn't cancel them. He helped redeem them. They had to admit, they had to go through that process of repentance. They had to let their story become something else. They had to write some new chapters. But there is a potential future in all of these stories. And that's always hard to remember sometimes.
The language is weak enough that I wouldn't make this connection without the other connections we already have. But the tearing to pieces and carrying off seems like it could be another tie into Judges 19.
Oh, goodness gracious. Brent, goodness gracious. Look at that.
And
like I said, the language isn't exact, but just with all the other connections we already have, it's just like one more element that comes from that story.
Yeah, goodness.
Well, and so there's oh gosh, I'm seeing so much stuff here. So one of the things to go back to this connection between Ephraim and this barrage of Remazim, about like the fact that throughout that reference to what was it Ramah, Gibeah, Be'aven, like it's continuously horn imagery.
Yep.
Like sounding the horn. And at the beginning of what you flagged as like the beginning of the drosh part.
Yeah.
The very first thing he says, you aren't hidden from me.
Yeah.
Which to me says like they are still trying to play the game of being like, yes, we're the priests, we're being faithful, like let's keep up the charade. And he's like, I see you. And then when he points out like these stories, both of which are stories brilliantly where like, again, Benjamin does not have a future. Like Saul is about to eat it. The tribe of Benjamin is on the brink of extinction from the other story. And God's being like, I'm blowing the horn. I'm like, this has to be like, it doesn't just have to be seen and acknowledged. It needs to be like fully seen and fully acknowledged and fully felt and experienced before we can begin to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about this too, like, one of the things reading through Hosea in preparation for this is like what you talked about with, the prophets in general, the sprinkling of hope, is that he gets to the hope sprinkling pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because the rest of his message is just so painful and caustic and full of vitriol and hate and suffering.
Yeah.
But one of the, it's so because I at the end here when we talked about Ephraim seeing the sickness, and I love that it also talks about Judah, like it kind of throws in Judah seemingly out of nowhere, which is interesting. But it talks about Ephraim going to Assyria, which like in retrospect, all these years later, that's kind of That's like an irony. Like the northern kingdom is gone because they did go to Assyria. They got some help from Assyria.
Yep.
And being like, if you keep operating under this charade, like you're literally speeding up this process of running into the brick wall, but that the hope comes not from beating the case or, repenting at the last second. It's like, nope, you just have to take the hit. And this is where I think, going back to your point about like, we can't just point at the people in leadership and laugh and be like, yeah, God's going to tear them down, because it's like, well, that the same way that their bad leadership has affected, not just their generation, but all the generations after them, like it has consequences that will affect us and our children. Like it's not just gonna be, the punishment falls on only the people who are 100% guilty. It's also going to fall on people who are innocent and people who are half guilty and all that stuff. But, and what this reminds me of, if I can make another big leap, is this reminds me of Job. Because largely cool. I read Job as kind of like the outcry of like, well, everyone had to go into exile, and that means some people who were the righteous ones.
Yep.
In their tribe, their town was like full, like, a Boaz, right?
Yep.
A Boaz in the time of Judges. Like that's who Job was. And he's like, why am I here? Like, God, we were doing it. We had like a little kingdom community. Things were going. And then like, why is this happening?
Yep.
And what's interesting is that God shows up right after Elihu comes and gives his speeches. And one of my good friends, Rachel, who's brilliant, she pointed out that in Elihu's poetry, it all sounds straight up like Mesopotamian theology, Assyrian theology. Even like the things he references, he talks about God and the pit, which the pit is a huge metaphor. But specifically, he keeps telling Job, like, don't try and get God's attention. If you get God's attention, like he'll just squish you, you little bug. And like that is, I mean, like when we talk about the Mesopotamian creation story and especially their flood narrative, it's like, oh, the human beings were literally too noisy. The gods couldn't sleep, so they said, let's drown them all. Right. Like that is, so it's almost like Elihu represents. It reminds me of the beginning of this chapter where he said, what is it? Chapter 7. They have given birth to strange children or illegitimate children. It's like God will come back when, like, again, things are at the brink where the next generation sound almost like the nation that we're exiled in. Like, oh my gosh, my kid's coming home and he just sounds like an Assyrian. He doesn't even sound Jewish anymore. Like God, like, are you going to step in? And he's like, that's the extent of how damaging it's going to get. You're going to feel alienated from your own family. But, and this is what's beautiful about it, is like you said, God's not absent, but God can't show up. God won't show up until, like, they don't just have to seek his face. Because like I said earlier in the chapter, they'll seek, they'll even change their ways and, get their flocks, and they won't be able to find me. But when they can acknowledge their guilt, when they can bear that and seek my face.
Yeah.
And to me, that there's something about that combination of bearing the guilt and seeking God's face. Not just bearing the guilt and saying, oh, we deserve it, I give up, the Assyrians beat us, whatever.
Yeah.
Like but like to both acknowledge, like, we messed up and we are going to take the hit. And even the children who didn't deserve it, they're going to take the hit. And maybe my grandkids will take the hit.
Yep.
But we still have to seek God anyway.
Yep.
Like, we are the ones who made this bed. This isn't God being capricious. This is like acknowledging how much we have become the anti-story.
Yes.
And being like, yeah, this is our cup to drink.
I could not think all Josh has done is just teed up my closing note. Probably doesn't even know it, but I mean, what a perfect setup. Brent, I'm going to close with this. I'm going to read a bit. A couple episodes ago, I talked about one of the resources I was kind of using in preparation. It was a sermon series by Roger Levitt, a preaching from Hosea, Gospel for Broken Things. And he had this paragraph in his notes. Now, remember, everybody, this was written in 1994. 1994. This is going to feel like, when is this episode supposed to post, Brent? I'm a little concerned about dates here.
Let's see. Where are we at? This is going to be November 7th.
All right. Which is 2 days after we've cast our ballots. All right.
Yep.
Great timing.
All right. Well, so at least we know where this is landing. Here we go, everybody. Nazi Germany taught us a powerful lesson. Hitler used the established church to accomplish his terrible goals. Each nation has tried to wrap God in the colors of their own selfish interests. Hosea 5 says this will not work. Adonai spoke, I myself will tear and go away. I will carry off, and no one shall rescue. I will return again to my place until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. And listen to these words here. Let this be a warning. God cannot be manipulated or counted on to support our interests, our parties, or our causes. God is not Baal. He will return only when we put away our sinful ways. Whew!
Mm-hmm.
From 1994. Oh, goodness gracious.
Man, I love that verse he highlights too. One of the things that jumps out to me here is God saying, like, not just that he's turning into an attacking lion, but that he's like, I'm going to go back to my place. Like, indicating that, like,
yes,
we're the prodigal, and he's still been following us. Like,
yes.
like Cain wandering. He's like, I've been with you, but, like, you finally crossed the line. I can't keep following you.
Yep. And when you want to come back, when you want to actually do the work of coming back, I'll be right where I ought to be. I'll be in my place. But I'm not going to keep following you over there to whatever your thing is, which is a great setup for our next episode. There you go, Brent.
All right. Well, I think, Marty, you might have theorized that this could potentially be Josh's shortest episode. And I think you're probably right. I don't know. I'll have to check the records.
I took it upon myself. It's a challenge.
Keep me in line.
Well, we kept digging up juicy stuff, but it seems like there's probably more there to mine out. So let the study continue for sure. You guys can find more details about the show at BamaDiscipleship.com. Check your podcast app or the website for show notes. I'll link again to that Roger Levette piece, and I think that's all the links we have for this one. But you can also use the website to get in touch with us. Use the contact page, check the news page for everything that's happening. If you want to support our work, you can do so there as well. Everything we do is made possible by people like you who want to join us on this journey and be a part of supporting what we do. So thank you for that, and thanks for joining us on the Bama Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.
So I have a juicy extra tidbit from Alter that I didn't want to, overweight anything, because it's kind of, I don't know exactly where this is. It seems like there is an additional tag on verse 2 of chapter 5 in the Masoretic text.
Are we all still recording?
I'm still recording.
Start it up again, Marty. That way, if you decide that this is too good, then I can throw it in at the end.
I'm going again. There'll be another short track.
Yeah, so I found a little extra tidbit just to add to our host of remezim. So in the first one that we hit on, in Alter's translation, right after it talks about Tabor and Mizpah, he has an additional little verse that says, they have dug a deep pit at Shittim, and I am chastisement for them all. Now, I don't know if that's just like in some manuscripts. I don't know why that wasn't in the other ones. But he said, like, there's some weirdness. It looks like a scribal error, and so it's spelled a different way. But he says it's most likely Shittim to be like the third in this list of place names.
Yeah.
And when I looked up Shittim, do you know what happens at Shittim?
Go ahead.
This is Baal Peor. Right after Balaam goes and tries to use God, literally use God to curse Israel, can't do it. And then finally he says, okay, you know what? We don't have to literally use God's power. Why don't you just go out and seduce Israel at Shittim?
Golly.
And he says, you've dug a pit there.
Man.
You've dug a pit at Shittim. Oh my gosh.
Well, Speaking of a curse, Brent, you might have to like bleep out and not put in what I did there when I heard it.
I didn't hear anything.
Yeah,
Me either. That is great. That is great.
That was I don't think so I was reading the NET footnote on this phrasing, and it seems like there's maybe not any manuscript evidence supporting it necessarily.
Interesting.
But the Masoretic text, or I don't know exactly. I don't quite understand what's going on, because it seems like there's some editors or some people who are like, this doesn't quite seem right. We think the Masoretic text got it wrong, but it's like they also don't reference other manuscripts that have it another way.
Yeah.
But the reading that we did from the NIV is the rebels are knee deep in slaughter, and they're saying that the Hebrew text literally is those who revolt have gone deep into slaughter, or deep in depravity, as the NASB puts it. But NRSV, NLT use this alternate version that apparently Alter ascribes to as well.
But see, that's where he has the rebels and the slaughter line.
Oh, he does.
Well. Yeah, he does.
Oh, okay. Well, the alternate reading is they have made the pit of Shittim deep.
Ooh, that's good too.
Yeah.
Yes, it is good. You know why he uses that, Brent? It's because it's an alternate reading.
Oh, you son of a gun.
I did not expect that from you, Marty.
On a serious note, though, I wonder, because the god there, it's a Baal, but he's called Baal Peor.
Yeah.
And I think the word for a pit is sometimes Beor. So I wonder if there's also supposed to be like wordplay there.
Golly, that's great.
Where's L? Where is Elle?
Shaking her head at us right now.
Yeah.
She's with my wife right now, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, good enough.